Aloha, everyone. I'm your Minna Van Dyken, MD from Out of the Doldrums. If you've been following us for a little while, it's no secret that we love nitric oxide. We've posted a few videos discussing nitric oxide, endogenous production of nasal nitric oxide, and prevention, possibly even treatment of COVID-19. I'm going to link all those videos in the description below. But for the video today, we're going to talk all things related to nasal nitric oxide spray and COVID. I've been so lucky to spend time with the founders of the SaNOtize company, Chris Miller, PhD, and Gilly Regev, PhD. Dr. Regev is an experienced biotech executive with hands-on experience in launching pharmaceutical enterprises. And Dr. Miller is a pioneer in nitric oxide technology and therapeutic research. Together, they've spearheaded the creation and research behind SaNOtize, a nasal nitric oxide delivery spray. They just published a randomized controlled trial demonstrating quicker clearance of the SARS-CoV-2 virus using their spray. We'll talk a little bit about this trial in the interview today, but for a detailed review of it, check out this other video I made reviewing the nitty-gritty of the trial details. It's all linked in the description below. In this interview today, we talk about nitric oxide as well as the development of the nitric oxide nasal spray. We briefly explore how it works and exactly how it's used, especially against COVID-19. We also talk about upcoming studies planned, and we touch on the company's plans to distribute the spray widely, including in the US and Canada. It's a great interview, and I definitely learned quite a bit. So without further ado, I bring you Dr. Regev and Dr. Miller. I hope you enjoy. So I'm here today with Gilly and Chris. These are two amazing people. They have really been pioneers in nasal nitric oxide spray. And there's a lot of interesting data, especially a brand new study that came out. And I can't wait to talk more about it. So welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
Hi, thank you for having us.
For sure. Gilly, let's start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in this project?
Sure, happy to. I'm born and raised in Israel, did my PhD at the Hebrew University in biochemistry, and moved to Canada about 18 years ago to Vancouver. And then about 14 years ago, I met Chris somewhere at a hallway, and he said, "Hey, you're a biochemist. I need some help with figuring out some things," and started working together. And I asked him the next day, "Tell me everything you know about nitric oxide," and I'm still learning until today.
Beautiful. I love that. I love that. And Chris, you have been on our show before, so we know a little bit about you. But briefly, tell us your history about respiratory therapy and how you worked with nitric oxide.
Yeah, I was initially a respiratory therapist in a neonatal unit, and I saw an abstract about nitric oxide back in 1989, and about a molecule, and I was fascinated that a gas molecule, because as a respiratory therapist, that's all we did, gas with oxygen and with life support. And so I was fascinated. And at the time I was thinking about doing a PhD. So I did to find out more about it, I did basically a literature search and published that in 1992, and just became fascinated with it. Of course, helped out with the neonates for its approval as for treating blue babies and some of the equipment. And was involved in that. But my real passion was learning a little bit about its antimicrobial activity, and have been studying that since basically 1997 to see if we could somehow harness the antimicrobial effect of nitric oxide and be able to help people in disease and infectious diseases. So that's my background.
Beautiful. And you're definitely making headway on that. I just saw, and that's the reason why I wanted to talk with both of you today, is the paper that you just published. It is finally a big, huge scale trial that is showing the efficacy of your spray. But before we talk about that, can we back up just for a moment and talk about the nitric oxide and how exactly is it antimicrobial and antiviral?
I think we in the past used to call it a nitrosilite because nitric oxide nitrosylate cysteine moieties and change structure of proteins, and it can deactivate enzymes and different proteins. So it has a whole range of different mechanisms of action to nitric oxide within bacteria, viruses, fungi. So it doesn't differentiate. The beauty about nitric oxide is it can kill all these bugs at the same time as not harming our own cells, because it's a natural molecule in our body, and our body is used to seeing nitric oxide. So there are lots of different mechanisms, and specifically with viruses, we have characterized a few different mechanisms of actions, which explains how our product work and change the structure of the virions themselves, and does not allow the virions to basically get attached to the receptor and get into the cells. It doesn't allow them the virions to replicate, because you need the virions to replicate within the cells, and it stops the replication of the virus. And on top of that, specifically our nasal spray has a little bit of a chemical and physical barrier as well. So prevents the viruses from getting into our cells.
I see.
And this is, again, just one product, which is, I know, exciting because it's the first product that actually gets to the market, and Chris and I are super excited about getting all these approvals around the world for a product-based nitric oxide. But this is just the first one out of a whole platform technology of products that we have, and we're hoping to bring to make people's life better.
That's great. Great. So this paper that was published, a large study, it is open access, meaning that anybody can read the paper online. I'll put a link in the description below. It's a very well designed study, and there's some really nice endpoints, and it's laid out nicely. Can you summarize just the study and what it was, and how it was done and where it was done?
Maybe we start just to remind you that it was all based on the UK trial that initially we did. This whole nasal spray, we wanted it to be a prevention. And we were hoping that we can get it. Doing prevention trials are very large trials and take a lot of time, and you need enough people on the control to get infected. So what we've decided is to try and show that we can reduce the viral load, because if you can reduce viral load in people that are already sick with high viral load, then if you just got infected yesterday and today and you're using the spray, you will hopefully prevent the disease. So initially we went and we did this UK trial where we showed it was only 80 subjects, but 40 control, 40 treatment. And we showed a really strong reduction in viral load in people that are already positive tested. So that was kind of the basic to the phase 3 trial that was done in India.
Yeah, because we love doing really solid science. And so really solid science, when you look at papers, they need to be randomized controlled trials to really be able to ascertain whether it's really effective. Because quite frankly, we have a lot of anecdotal studies that for lots of different things that we could show 9 or 19 or 20 or 30 patients, that have improved. But until you've done randomized controlled trials under the auspices of a external regulatory body, then it really doesn't count in our estimation. And we want to bring solid science, a product that has a solid science to it, to individuals, because we care. That's what we care about the most, is having the depth and the solid science that proves that it is working. So the UK trial was great, and it gave us the safety. It gave us this, what we call a strong signal. But that data allowed us to design a really solid, large trial. Now, something that Gilly didn't mention is what's really important for COVID, especially now with all the talk, is what we call I call agnostic effect of nitric oxide. And she alluded to it earlier, is that in the UK trial, we were able to do this in individuals that had been infected with the UK, which is we now know as the alpha, and also the parent strain. And so it worked in those two, the one variant of concern at that time. What's exciting is that still translates across in this study. This study was based on the Delta and Omicron, almost a 50-50 split. And so this tells us very strongly that that our intervention works across the variants, which is very hopeful right now, because the variants, the virus is every day you hear a different variant and it's affecting, and it's hard for the vaccine guys to keep up. So we're hoping that as we in the study show that we reduce the viral load rapidly and effectively, that it shortens the time to a negative PCR, and it also we were able to show that it shortens the clinical progression, which is really great. And so those are the three main things that this study did, and and
I think the fact that we got a 3 days versus 7 days from starting of the treatment, positive to negative, is huge, because at the end of the day, we're very much limited today. Once you're positive, you can't go out, you can't do anything. There was actually a research that was published in Nature a few days ago that says, even after 5 days, if you're positive, you may still be infecting others. So if you can use the spray and shorten the time that you have to isolate and go back to work faster, so all these really matters in the world that we live in today.
It does, and especially in my field as well, for healthcare workers, if you are out for 3 days versus 7, that's huge. That is a big improvement.
Right. And the second thing is reduction of infectivity, which is very important. We have had some signals in this trial showing that which makes sense, if you're using it and you have lower viral load, you're less infective to others. So if there's your household or anyone around you, you may be infecting less.
Yes, yes.
And maybe we should just comment here. I don't know if you're aware, but the product is approved in Thailand, and we have some colleagues there at the university, and this is a fact. They did a study, and that we kind of knew about, but they did it on their own, and it's kind of exciting because the data is really interesting. So they used it on an outbreak in students. They had students going back to university between or after the Omicron wave, or pardon me, after the Delta wave. So they thought it was safe to bring the students back to university for certain faculties like physical education, some medical students, groups like that needed to be on campus. So they brought them back just, initially. But what happened, they were housed in dorms, and there was five students per dorm. And then all of a sudden the Omicron wave hit them. And so students were getting infected. And so what they did, they had the opportunity to say, hey, we have this spray, we'll give it to you if you want, and then we'll isolate you. So it was a really nicely controlled study from that perspective, as they took those that had definitely been exposed without a mask for at least 5 minutes, and that's being very conservative. They were living in the same place, and then the guy became positive, right? So then they took them, put them in separate rooms, gave them the opportunity. And this was a study of over 600 patients. So over 200 of those used what we call Virex. That's what the approved name is, the brand name in Thailand is. And the rest just decided not to. And what was very exciting is 26% of those didn't get it, that didn't use it, got infected, whereas only 6%.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a 75% improvement in protection. It's like huge. And so we're working with them to encourage them to figure out how they can publish it and stuff like that. But it's because we're scientists, it's an observational trial. It wasn't randomized controlled. It was open labeled. So, I mean, even though compared to a lot of the data out there about other things, to us, we're very cautious about this. But what that gives us is it gave us the information to help design our global prevention trials that are going on right now.
Tell me more about that. What trials do you have going on right now?
So we have a Health Canada approved trial that is being used. It started in Sri Lanka, and it has expanded to Canada. And we just had a meeting with the FDA, and we're hoping to expand that into the States. And so currently we have, I think, 1,300 as of last week in the trial. But this trial will go up into the thousands and thousands to show prevention, because it all depends on how many people get infected in both the arms, right? And so, you know, to give you an idea of the expense and the challenge of these trials, out of the 1,300 patients, only 15 have become infected.
Wow.
And it's a 1-to-1 trial. So, you know, and that's why we initially went with the as Gilly had mentioned, with the reduction in viral load and the treatment.
Yeah. And it's all blinded, so we don't know these people that got infected, if they're control or treatment. This will only be open at the end. You only know numbers of infections. So this is a large trial. The cost of these trials are extremely high. So
yeah, so I understand that the trial that was done and just published in the Lancet Journal, that was partially funded by Glenmark. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Do you have funding for your global studies that are going on now?
Yeah, we're just completing a large fundraising. Yes.
Good. So I have some questions that some of the viewers had asked from the video that we did prior on the nasal nitric oxide spray. I was wondering if I could ask some of them to you guys. First one, and it's really relevant to what we're doing now, is a lot of people are very excited about the research that you are doing, and they want to know how and if they can enroll in trials to help further your research along.
So these trials are localized, and so we've started, you know, in Canada. We have one site just outside Toronto, but we're looking to expand in the United States. Like I said, we just had an FDA meeting. They've allowed us to start doing phase 3 trials, which is a huge step for us to be able to go into phase 3 trials. That means we're getting close. We hope we're getting close. So we'll be expanding that, and the best place to look is under clinicaltrials.gov, and we will be putting the sites there as we expand. So we really appreciate everyone wanting to, you know, to help out, but we have to do it in a systematic way. And probably the best way to track is clinicaltrials.gov. And I think the trial name is COVID-NONS for nitric oxide nasal spray -04. And we can probably get you the NCT number also to make it easier for your viewers to find.
Good, and I'll link that below as well in the description. Thank you, that was very helpful. Next question I have is, what does this product do for our microbiome? Does the nitric oxide damage any of the healthy bacteria that live in our mouth and our tongue?
That's a good question.
That's a great question, because
we
asked that many years ago. And two things that's really, I think, cool about nitric is that, first of all, our bodies produce it, right? So it's a naturally occurring, and our bodies know how to detoxify it. And the nice thing about the way we deliver it, the dose we give it, it's very short acting, meaning it will get rid of the microbes regardless. And it's a good point. Will it get rid of the microbiome? Probably, but it's temporary. And so what we're seeing, like in our wound studies, preliminary wound studies and things like that, is we're seeing, you know, and studies like the chronic sinusitis study that we're doing. That's a real microbiome intense kind of study. So the nitric gets rid of the pathogens and then the normal flora comes back. So it's not like, and the problem with antibiotics, as you know, or the challenge, I mean, antibiotics are great, but the challenge with them is that they're given for 10, 15 days. And so that takes out all of the, for a long period of time, the microbiome. And then that can be, as you know, not very good. But yeah, so it's a great question. Gilly, do you want to
Yeah,
comment?
I think that the moment if it's natural to our body, then very quickly it will recover and come back. So we bring everything down, but then the natural microbiome will come back, while the hostile viruses or bacteria that we don't want are not coming back.
That makes sense.
Really, if you think about it from a natural approach to treating, is that we're using a natural intervention that allows the natural normal flora and microbiome to maybe be enhanced to what it really was and gets it to reset.
Interesting. That's an interesting way to look at it. So, kind of along those lines, you know, the nitric oxide half-life is pretty short. I read in your study you were administering 6 times per day. Is that kind of the number, or how did you come up with that frequency?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So from a treatment perspective, that's where we are dosing it. And the logic, here's the logic. It was based on the in vitro data that showed how fast that we kill it. And then we went into the literature and we learned what the replication cycle is, like the latent period. How long does it take for the virus to enter the cell, host cell, replicate, and then explode and reinfect? And so in the early days of COVID, that was about, they said, between 4 and 6 hours. So our logic was, as Gilly had mentioned earlier, you knock down, because the nitric oxide works extremely fast at the viruses that are there. And then you interrupt it before the next cycle starts. And that was kind of the logic. So that's for treatment. That's how we got 6 times a day. But what we've also learned from a prevention perspective, we originally did our work on, okay, 2 to 3 times a day, right? So before you go out, that allows you, and then maybe during lunchtime, if you get exposed during the morning, you treat, and then your afternoon to get exposed, and then you treat when you come home from work, sort of thing. And so that's logic there. But what we've learned is when we'll be adjusting this is that we're going to 3 to 4 times a day because, as you know, the new variants replicate faster. There's a shorter latent period of time. So we're going to 3 to 4. And on our label, it says, if you feel you've been exposed or you're in a high risk area, then you can increase it up to 6 times a day.
Yeah, I can tell you, I'm usually using it 3 to 4 times a day on a daily basis. And then when I got once, actually 3 times, a very close exposure. One of them was a 24-hour exposure, and I just amped it up to 6 times a day for 3 days. So you want to make sure that if you were exposed and you got the virus, you can bring it down effectively. And it's all based on a lot of safety data that we have. So there is no issue with we've done a lot of safety trials, and we have a lot of safety data that's showing that 6 times a day, when people are positive tested, they've been using it for up to 14 days in a row for 6 times a day. So we have all the safety data around this.
And maybe I can comment on just the safety aspect of it. It's really, really safe, but we've had to prove it's really safe. You can't just say it's safe. So with the regulatory agencies, we have looked at, is there absorption into the tissues? Is there absorption into the systemic circulation? Is there, do we produce at the epithelial level nitrosamines? Do we, and the answers are negative to all these, but you have to prove all these things. So the point is that with the FDA, for instance, you don't get a chance to go into phase 3 trials until you have proved and protected the public as much as possible. Now, with that said, everybody's going to say, well, look what happened to some of these other treatments. They got fast tracked. And that's the trade-off, the risk benefit. And I'd hate to be the government making these decisions, because it's, it's like, risk benefit.
You're looking at some of the treatments that's been approved for COVID, and I mean, we've showed a similar reduction in viral load with minimal side effects, drug interaction, all of this. So it really, our medical director calls it a stellar safety profile.
I like that.
That's rare. That's rare in this world for prescription drug. Like in the United States, the FDA said this will be prescription because nitric oxide is used in blue babies. And so the precedent has been set. And that's what makes it so tough for us, is it's OTC in all the other countries, because our logic, they listen to our logic. And, again, it's that risk benefit in those countries. When we first started, there was no vaccines available to them. And so this was a logical, safe way that they could bridge until they had the vaccines. And we focused on that. We've been a little bit criticized that why didn't you focus on the, from a business perspective, why didn't you develop United States? It's the biggest, richest kind of market you can go after. And, but from a company perspective, we ethically said, hey, let's go there. And the logic, as we've explained, is that it is safe. And we have shown that data to them. And so they understood, and, that the babies get 200 times the dose compared to what we're giving locally. So we're nominal when it comes to how much nitric we're actually introducing to the surface of the body. So it's very safe. And so other regulatory agencies have looked at it and said, no, this is OTC. And of course we follow. We have like over 500,000 people that have used it. And we have a pharmacovigilance program and a survey program where people can respond, and we've tracked very closely safety. So
yeah. And again, we are hoping that US, Canada, eventually it will be an over-the-counter product, but it's a process. So we have to just follow all the guidelines and the process in order to get it eventually approved as an over-the-counter. Because you want people to really have easy access to it, and people can use it when they travel, when they want to protect themselves, or even when they get positive tested.
Correct. And even not only for COVID, but for other respiratory infections, it would be nice to be able to pick it up on your way when you're traveling, like you're saying.
Yeah, I think we've both been for many years before COVID traveling with it. Always, every time I go on a plane, I used to get sick all the time, and started just traveling with it and spray during the flight, after the flight, and stop just catching all these viruses on flights. So there are many places, and people would likely choose to use it at different times. And we're hoping before winter coming now, they're all talking about potentially a tough flu season or a flu COVID combination. So this is, as Chris says, it's agnostic. It will get rid of any virus.
Envelope virus.
Yeah,
I have to qualify.
Okay. So back to the agnostic, one of the questions that one of the viewers asked was, does this work against mold in the airways or fungal stuff? Do you have any idea on that?
We have quite a lot of data on molds and fungi. We do have, we've done a clinical trial for athlete's foot, which is basically a fungal infection. And we've shown that 3 days of just half an hour foot bath completely get rid of the fungus on the foot. So yes, we have in vitro, we have clinical data. We are designing now a trial for the nail fungus because we know that this liquid kills. We've done studies, what's called ex vivo, where we took nails that are infected and we soak them in this liquid. And nitric oxide is very small molecule, so it penetrates. So yes, there are a lot of different indications. We just have to be careful. It's topical, right? So we need to get the liquid to where the infectious component is.
Right. Got it. Back to the safety profile, I noticed in the paper that I read, there was a lot of safety checks and a lot of potential adverse events were reported, or lack thereof was reported. One thing that I was wondering personally is I saw they were checking for methemoglobin. What's the connection with that, and why are we looking for methemoglobin?
That's a great question. So anybody that's talking about nitric oxide need to understand that how the body works with nitric oxide. Okay, so nitric oxide does not stay as nitric oxide in the blood, and it has a high affinity to hemoglobin, or the red blood cell. It attaches to it, and it attaches so strongly that it's 200 times more affinity than carbon monoxide. So the way that the regulators and all of us that do nitric oxide research, how we determine whether it's toxic or not is based on the methemoglobin level. So we measure methemoglobin because if you have a high methemoglobin, and you're, depending who you are and if you smoke and blah, 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 or what you eat, like if you eat a lot of greens, you have a high level of nitrites, and you can have actually nitrite poisoning. And how you determine nitrite poisoning, surprisingly enough, is a high methemoglobin, because the nitrates get back into nitrites, and then it becomes nitric, and nitric immediately gets absorbed into as it reacts with hemoglobin. And so that's why there's this limited effect of it. So it's important to track methemoglobin, because by doing so, we're able to see if our intervention gets absorbed systemically, because it's a very sensitive measurement. And so that's why we followed that. So we're able to conclusively show that we don't have a systemic effect, because we're not changing the methemoglobin.
Yeah, and all the inhalation, when you inhale nitric oxide for the blue babies, or they always measure methemoglobin because you have a certain limit that you can reach, and that's it.
Yeah.
So you have to be very careful. Think about it. It takes the space of the oxygen. So if nitric oxide is attached, then oxygen is not. So you have to always measure it. But we've confirmed in all our treatments that we're doing, it's not systemic, so it doesn't change the methemoglobin in the body.
So that's why in all our clinical trials we measure methemoglobin, because that is the marker for toxicity or systemic. So as Gilly mentioned, with the babies, they always measure methemoglobin in the blood about every 4 hours. And so that's how we track it for safety.
Makes sense. So this spray locally absorbed is what you're saying, kind of wherever it's topically applied. So if it's in your airways, it's going to be effective just there. So the strategy, I'm just talking out loud so I have it right in my head and to my viewers. The strategy is to have this topical coating inside your nose and your passageways there that is going to kind of serve as a barrier and an antiviral, not necessarily in the lungs. You want to get it before it goes into your lower airways. Yeah.
We're trying to, and that's the prevention aspect. We're trying to catch early in the disease. We're not purporting whatsoever that this is moderate disease or severe disease. And what that means, moderate and severe, means that the viral shedding has gone from your nose into your throat into your lungs. And so it's progressed. So we're trying to catch it early as a prevention or early treatment. And think of it this way. One way to think of it is from a treatment perspective or a prevention treatment. Think of it as a hand sanitizer of the nose.
That's such a good analogy. Yeah.
Or a liquid mask.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I like that even better.
That's not ours. That's people that have written to us and said, hey, it's like this, or it's like that.
That's good. Good. Some other questions that I have, these actually came from my husband because we did order some and ship them from Israel. But when he was using it, he was noticing a little bit of burning in the airways. And from what I can read, that's pretty common, correct?
That is how you know it's working, really. Yeah, it will sting a little bit. I mean, I've been using it for years, and it's still, when I spray it in, it has a little bit of a stinging sensation for a second, right? And then it's gone.
But with that said,
Some people
some
don't,
people
yeah.
don't get it, or they start and then they don't get it. And so really what it is the sensitivity of the mucosal membrane of where you are in that process, right?
Okay.
And so some people don't get it at all. And it's not like everybody gets it, but there's certainly a what I call astringent feel. You know you're using it.
Oh yeah. I mean,
And
every time I do it, it's like, ooh, like you feel this like 1 second of, yes, you feel it. But yeah, we've talked to some people that said, wow, I don't feel anything. Does this mean it doesn't work? Some people just don't feel it. They don't have this sensation. But yeah, most will.
but the important thing is that people need to know is that we have done toxicity tests, and what the level is that we know of toxicity that kills 50% of the cells in a period of time at the dose, and we have over 100% safety margin on it. So we have done that, and so it's important for people to know that we do the deep science as far as safety goes. One thing you mentioned earlier that I should mention, you had said about lungs. We specifically have designed the spray, and people will notice this. They'll say, oh, the spray kind of doesn't look like a spray. It looks kind of like there's different sizes. Like it seems it's not a mist. Well, there's a reason for that. And the reason for that is we ensure, and we do actually what's called particle analytics or spray analytics. We make sure that the droplet size are bigger than 10 microns. And the reason we do that is because, like other medicaments that you want to go to the lungs, you want them to be 5 microns, because that means they get to the lungs. So we're trying to prevent going into the lungs with this, because we really want it to rain out in the nose and upper airway where we're targeting the viruses.
That makes sense. So you want to keep it out of the lungs in the upper airways. Question again from my husband: 2 sprays in each nostril, which is what the package says, is a lot of liquid. So my husband's like, what do I do with all this? Do I swallow it? Do I like let it kind of sit?
Half an ml.
Okay. Yeah, it's about 130 microliters per thing.
Maybe it's a time to really explain how to spray it, because if you spray it correctly, there's barely nothing coming back out. Like if you spray to the outside,
Oh,
like I've got nothing dripping. So it does go in.
With that said, the volume of the nose is about 60 microns to cover the inside of the nose. We're giving 120. Okay, so it will drip out. There's nothing wrong with it dripping out. I mean, and just dabbing it off.
Yeah.
We're trying to bathe the nose. We don't have to worry about a dosing requirement. So we have to cover all sizes of noses, right? And so whether it be a little petite nose or whether it be a large, big schnoz, as we say, we got to cover it all. So you got to go for the maximum dose. Otherwise, you're not going to get it. So we do know some people, and we don't purport this, but one spray more times, 12 times a day, so there's, and so there's nothing wrong. For instance, my wife, she claims, because it is a mucolytic, she does it once and then she blows her nose, then she gives another.
Oh, right. Kind of cleans it out a little bit.
It's unlike antibiotics, which is very precise dose. We're talking about a gas within a liquid here. So it's a whole other, I mean, I don't know any other drug that was approved that's a gas within a liquid. So everything is new, even to regulators. It's like, how do you measure it? How do you know how much? And it's not things that are exactly microgram per ml dosing. It's just different. And I think part of what Chris's team has done very well is putting in words that regulators can understand it and can have something to confirm, to compare it to, and be able to understand the whole dosing rationale behind this.
Because the regulators, as well as the public, they want to know how much nitric is given, is it given consistently, and is it, what's the dose? And so we've been able to work with the regulators to ensure and show them how this is done and how we do this, so that we can say if we change any aspect of the formulation, or if someone changes the ingredients on us, we can tell, because of the amount of nitrics that's produced or not produced over a period of time.
Fascinating. One question that I had also that I wanted to ask was, let's say you have an exposure. How long do you think after the exposure is too long to initiate starting the spray? Do you have any data on that?
Yeah, I mean, our treatment trials specifically address that. So within 72 hours of that.
But that's within 7 jars of
A
starting,
positive test.
yeah, getting a positive test or symptoms. So I would say it's never too late to start it. Of course, if you were exposed, you want to do it as early as possible. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't, there's not, oh, I missed that point, then I don't need to use it. It will help you later on as well, even if you are turning out positive.
Because that's what the treatment trials are, right? So it's a reduction in viral load. So even if you're on day 2 or day 3, you can still intervene and more rapidly reduce the viral load to nothing and inactivate it. So anywhere along the process is going to help.
Yeah, but it's like, think about the way I use it is like it's exactly like we said, the hand sanitizer. You go to the grocery store, you get out, you use a hand sanitizer, right? For everything you touch, you spray at the same time. So it's the same idea. I was exposed, I breathed something, it's like I touched something, and I'm going to spray.
But with that said, when I'm at home and I'm not exposed to anybody, I don't use it.
Yeah. So along those lines, one question that a viewer asked is it possible to overdose? If you spray all the time, say, can you possibly overdose on this?
No,
I've
to
tried
put it in perspective, we use similar formulation with chronic sinusitis. And some of your viewers will understand the neti pot or Neil-Ned bottle. That's 240 mils. So we use 240 mils in our clinical trial that's going on twice a day for 6 weeks. So
with nasal washes.
So the nasal spray per treatment is a 0.5 ml. So do the math, 0.5 ml into 240 to 880. To overdose is really virtually impossible.
Yeah, for sure.
The only thing we've seen with some people that are sensitive will have dry nose. If they use it quite a lot, they may see a little bit of bleeding.
Yeah, but
that's nitric oxide. It increases blood flow, right? So it makes sense.
Yeah, we've seen it in our pharmaca. I have to argue a little bit with them. Like it may not even be related, but it might be related. Like we have had like 4 in 500,000 cases. Okay. So, and it doesn't continue to bleed. It just, it bled. And so it was reported that they bled, but they didn't keep bleeding.
So one thought I had when I was reading your study was the control group used saline spray. It's kind of along the neti pot lines. Did you ever worry that maybe even just spraying saline might clear out some stuff?
Our India trial had saline with benzalkonium chloride. Benzalkonium chloride is known to be an antiviral. So it's really our control is it's an active control.
So yes, we did worry about it. And you can't believe the discussions we had in the company.
You want to do it right. You want to do it properly, but then yes, you're kind of hurting yourself because your control is an active control. So think about it. We've shown a strong reduction in viral load compared to an active control, which makes it even much more effective.
And that should be interpreted in this study as this is an amazing study in that we do know that you get a little bit of effect with just saline, right? Saline washes. And then on top of that, we've shown in our own internal in vitro work that we can get 1 log reduction with benzalkonium chloride. And so the data, as good as it is, does not reflect really how effective it is.
That's great.
It's a high bar that we are up against, and we agonized over that, because if we don't show a difference, then the regulators say, okay, you don't have a difference. So we gambled, and we came out on top.
It's always the
'Cause we-
challenge in clinical trial is to choose the right control, right? We have a diabetic foot ulcer trial that has the standard of care and control. And often people don't do standard of care. So when they get into a clinical trial with diabetic foot ulcer, 50% of them are getting better just because of the standard of care. So we always try to make sure that we show that what we have is better than the standard of care. It's more effective, and you'd better do it early on in these trials.
The other challenge, of course, in these trials is that we would love to have not done, like a nasal spray with saline, because we would show much better results. And you can it's reflected, you can see it in the Thai study, that much larger separation.
Yeah.
But then the question is, in randomized controlled trials, they're blinded, right? So how do you blind if you can't? You have to use the nasal spray, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, you have to
these
do
are
it
these are
blinded.
things I think that people don't realize, the challenges of really scientifically proving that something works.
Yeah. Yeah, they're saying that a lot of very effective treatments failed in clinical trials, because if the trial is not designed properly, if the control is too effective, there's so many reasons why trials could fail with an effective drug.
Yeah, very true. So as far as your other enterprises, you mentioned a couple different studies, athlete's foot, diabetic ulcers. How can we follow along on that and see the progression with that? Because those are also very exciting frontiers.
Well, we'll keep posted. We're just completing a chronic sinusitis phase 2 trial, a small trial, and then we have a trial that's all funded by the Department of Defense in the US. That's diabetic foot ulcer trial that we also use the standard of care as control, and that should be completed around the end of this year. So we'll publish results when we have them.
Beautiful. And are those on clinicaltrials.gov?
Yeah,
Wonderful.
we try to do everything properly.
I love it. That's great. We should probably wrap it up. Closing thoughts, comments, anything you wanted to share that we haven't discussed yet?
I think our mission, our goal here is to bring more effective non-antibiotic antimicrobial treatments to the world, and we're hoping to be the first nitric oxide based anti-infective drug to be approved by the FDA.
That's a lofty goal, and I'm rooting for you. It's going to happen. I think it has to.
I'd like to say that my dream did come true, within India, where we did get approval for nitric oxide as a treatment for COVID. And that was the second only approved nitric oxide drug use in the world. The first one was the blue babies in 1998, and this is the first one. So it was for Gilly and I, in our years and decades of work, to have that happen it was a moment for us.
Yeah.
And so now our next moment will be with the FDA, and to bring it to people on stateside.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for your time and your expertise. It's brilliant. I love the facts you are shouting out, and, down to concentrations. And of course, your product very well, but thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you
Thank
very
you
much
very
for
much.
having us here.
You're doing some great work too. We follow your podcast. So
Thank you.
We'll talk soon.
Okay.
okay.